it, I wouldn't have discussed it, but I'd much rather get your reactions first. And without revealing the back end, what are your feelings overall? Anybody want to chime in with that? No one?
Yeah, no, I'll say something. I
Okay.
I was the film for me was basically tension. It was like fine for about the first 15, 20 minutes, and then it was unbearably tense until the very end.
So is that a
And
good thing or a bad thing?
well, films are supposed to be like lots of other artistic endeavors, are supposed to affect you and bring out a response. And so, yes, it definitely brought out a response. And it's supposed to be, excuse me, I believe it was a reflection on society in general. There's some of it that reminded me of Lord of the Flies, actually, strangely enough.
Yeah. Well, everybody's a villain, everybody's an animal, and we're just human beings as well. So yeah, I'm glad you feel that way about it. I share your thoughts. Anybody else want to chime in? Marina.
I was mostly interested in the diversity of the people in the film. The teachers who are of Polish origin, the students who are of Turkish origin, different kinds of representatives of German society. It was interesting to see how they all are mixed up there.
And not just mixed up, there are different kinds of racism relative to each group, each subset.
Yes.
Really fascinating. It like peels back the layers of our own racism.
I spotted the racism immediately, and I saw this film at least 6 months ago at a film festival before, there were reviews or anything, but I thought, wow, the racism that is here in this European country is not at all unlike what we have here. And the quickness to blame the minority student.
Well, you could make a film about America and show the quickness to blame too. I think it's
Yeah,
universal.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm saying it was so similar.
yeah, right. Um, Linda Schatzer.
Yeah, as a former teacher, this really resonated with me. My first job was a high school English teacher in the New York City public schools. And I remember that feeling of coming in and having no control over the class. And it is the horrible, horrible feeling. And I really felt for her doing that. I also felt that in the real world, you have an administration. And if the administration is behind you, then you get the kids to cooperate because they have threats. They're going to call their parents in. They're not going to do well. But this teacher, she was so idealistic that I think idealistic to a fault, where she didn't step up. And what you do learn as a teacher at some point, you have to take control. And while you might get beginning some support from the administration, you've got to be in charge of that class. And I felt that she was so giving to all of these kids that she ultimately should have quit because her life was becoming a nightmare. And I think that the school itself really didn't seem to have a lot of final definitions of where the boundaries are between the students and the teachers. So for me, I think any ex-teacher watching this film is going to remember being in the classroom with the kids and what it was like.
So, Brad Ellison, I want you to chastise Jeffrey, your brother, for not attending tonight. I was really had a bunch of questions for him because he teaches middle school. And so let him know we're all very unhappy with him.
Yeah, I spoke with him before and he said he was coming. But, I was also a teacher at a middle school for 10 years. And yeah, I love the movie. I thought it was great. I think one of the things that it was showing us is that, European education, so different traditionally from American education. I mean, the hallmark of French education was to show the student how stupid he was. Whereas we've always tried to boost up our students. And in that way, this teacher was so enlightened and, very, very modern in terms of a European approach to education, which is so different than what goes on in our schools.
I want to go back to something that Linda just said in that the teacher should have left. Well, she did offer to leave late in the film. She said, no, 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 her eyes were on the prize, the boy and his well-being, because she knew his home life was very strange, even though she didn't know the details. And she felt that her leaving would be the most calming influence on the school. And the teachers shout her down. He said, no, no, we need you. We're understaffed as it is. It'll make it harder for the rest of us. So it's a small moment, but it covers that, where she's so self-giving, and I think you also said that she withholds too much. She should have fessed up more, but no, that wouldn't be in the spirit of an independent investigation. So she's holding to the letter of the law as well as the spirit of education, which is to put the child's welfare first. Very, a very strange combination, and that's why she is the way she is. Fern.
I thought that despite the fact that she was very idealistic and really enlightened, as the others have said, ultimately for me, the film was just a very depressing experience in every way. Every person's approach was either flawed or a failure. And the ultimate, it was just everything was a failure. And the fact that she was enlightened or, what very well meaning and certainly, very modern in her approaches, it didn't help anything. It just was a mess.
Right. In a way, maybe she was too super woke. We see instances of wokeness in the faculty.
Yes.
She was religious about it. She was enforcing no agenda other than our goal and our mission as educators is to take care of the kids. Did I see another hand? Somebody had, David, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. When I was talking about this being a reflection on society as a whole, I read a couple of reviews, and one of them commented that we find, like we find in society, there's misinformation flying around, there's slanted journalism, there's it seemed to me somewhat of a reflection of everything that has been going on for a while in the United States, and I think in a lot of other countries.
I'm sure it's a reflection of the EU. Germany has a history, and I think they're still overprotective of their penance and their shame at the Nazi past. So in a way, they are more woke than we are because they have more overt racism to make up for, whereas our racism, which is still very present, we didn't put people in boxcars and burn them, but we did relegate them to poverty for generations and abuse. So it's hard, it's like, what's worse? There's no comparison of degree. But the German case is such that they're very careful. And I'll refer to some moments. The Principal Bohm, she says that we have to be very careful about our phrasing. It's all about phrasing, it's like, it's marketing is another way of saying it. You've got to give them the message the way they want to hear it, which I thought was really smart. And not that everybody phrases things perfectly. Certainly the parents and the kids don't. In a way, the kids are more transparent, but we can talk about that later. The kids were amazing in this and scary as hell. That was the scariest thing for me. Anyone else before we dive into starting at the front end? Kimberly, glad you're with us. Nothing to say? Okay. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. I want you to know that there are only 2 scenes of action in this.
I think Mona had something to say.
Sorry, Mona. There you are. You're muted.
Sorry. I was just going to say one of the things I found incredibly interesting about the film was that in subtle ways, the background in East Germany of everybody informing on everybody else and there being these files from the Stasi is very present, so that this extraordinary sensitivity about leaving the computer on filming, which was obviously, it's also because EU privacy laws are so much stricter than American laws on that subject. I thought that was a very interesting layer.
Refresh my memory. How did you know it was an East German school?
I didn't think it was an East German school. I thought that
Yes.
because of the allusion to they were aghast that she had left her computer on to film, which I think would be deemed a pettier kind of infraction here than in Europe. And that started me thinking, and I thought, okay, probably some of the people teaching in this school, their parents may have experienced life in East Germany. And with the Stasi, the secret police, who were, collecting dossiers on everybody. And so it just occurred to me as I was watching that some of the extreme sensitivity about her filming in that way would be absolutely natural in such an environment.
Remember, we saw a film called The Lives of Others about a Stasi agent who listens in to the home of a playwright, and ultimately is converted to compassion for the playwright and is relegated to some job in the post office instead.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah, that's a great film. It just really remarkable, and there's less action in that too, but there's, like you said, David, there's a tension that is almost unbearable because everything's up in the air all the time. What's the implication of what somebody says or what they do, and there's so many players and so many issues. Marina, and then back to Steve, I think. Marina.
I just want to comment that computer spying, the computers are spying on us, our phones are spying on us, and our government is spying on us. And our government was spying on Angela Merkel, what she was talking on the phone about. So it's not only about the East Europe under communism and surveillance. It's about everybody, I think.
Yeah, good point. Good point. I'm sure I will pay for all my negative comments about Donald Trump if he's elected, but we'll face that when the time comes. Now, Marina, you're an emigre from Russia, am I correct? And
Ukraine. I grew up in the Soviet Union, but technically I'm from Ukraine, Odessa. That's being bombed this week.
Big Jewish community there, right?
Yes, used to be, or not as big now.
No, the war took care of that.
Yeah.
So
the war and immigration.
Yeah, they left. So my question to you is, did this film resonate with anything you experienced as you were growing up?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thought I'd ask. And Steve Miller, you had something? You're muted.
I found it very frustrating. I thought it's a no good deed goes unpunished. The more she tried to be nice and help others, the less it helped her. Right. And I just thought, go after these people. If someone's stealing from you, don't be nice. And I just all along, she's always trying to help others, and it doesn't do anything for her except increase her level of frustration and unhappiness.
And anxiety. She has a panic attack and goes to the bathroom to breathe into a bag.
Right.
Now, I want to address that comment because there's something I didn't quite understand. Very, very early in the film, she gives Oscar the Rubik's Cube. And that's after the theft. And is that an apology or a peace offering? I don't know what her motivation was, or a distraction, because she doesn't know if he knows about what the mother did or
I
not.
thought it wasn't any of those. I think he was a quiet, isolated kid. He wasn't getting along with the other guy. And she was saying, I see you and I kind of understand you, and I understand that you're a smart person.
Yes.
I think that's all it was. I don't think it related to all the other stuff at all.
I,
Because
I
he'd already,
disagree. I actually thought it was all of the above.
okay. I mean, he did have that go round in the classroom with Tom or Thomas, who taunted him. And yeah, he was a smart kid. We know that because she handed him his paper. He got the best marks in the class.
And he could figure out the Rubik's Cube.
Yeah. Natalie? Unmute Natalie. Corner. Can't hear you. We can't hear you, Natalie. There you go.
Now, is that
Yeah.
good?
Yes.
I was very sensitive to the relationship of she and the boy. I think she made comments somewhere toward the middle of the film that she too was an immigrant, that she knew what it was like to not be part of the group and accepted. This boy wasn't just smart, he was brilliant. That is the way I saw him, and she saw him
Mhm.
as being very special, and and he was special in knowing how to create havoc also. But being a very sensitive teacher, her heart went out to him, as mine did as well, that he had come from this mother and this bad situation. We know that he was angry in that class for many, many reasons.
Mhm.
But every single subject, he knew the answer. Remember when they're in the gym and she calls on him to figure out how to stand up on that mattress thing? He's the one who figured it out. Then when in the class there was a very difficult math problem, he was the only one who could figure it out. And I think that she had this, as I was a teacher also, that she thought possibly she could sort of save him to make him into something that he had the potential to be if someone had guided him right. And that very often happens in a school situation where a teacher is a wonderful, wonderful force behind a child who's brilliant and has no other person to push him through.
Mhm.
So that's the way I saw it.
No, I don't think you were wrong. Most people would agree with you. Chuck, did I see you wave your hand?
Yeah, I think
Are you there?
to me, the Rubik's Cube is kind of a key to the whole thing. I mean, yes, he was brilliant, and she showed him, at the beginning of potentially how to do it, and the story just took a tremendous turn in the last scene.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nobody, I
he
didn't
takes the
expect, I
cube
thought it was
and
a miserable.
shows her, that I don't think it was as important that he could do it, but more it was almost like an offering of you
Okay.
did get me.
Okay, let's not go there yet, because that's a
I
very.
won't go there. I never said anything,
Okay,
so
well, no, you're not wrong.
ignore what I said.
Just don't go further.
Okay.
Okay, so
Jim, I just wanted to add one more
Yeah.
general comment. I guess it's my American sensibilities or my distressing sense of America, but I kept thinking he's going to go crazy and shoot up the place. And I worried about it the whole time I watched it, which is a very, American ending for a German movie. But that's what I worried about.
Yeah. Well, remember when we saw American Fiction, there's that imaginary shooting at the end, which the producer loves. And it's on our minds. I totally get it.
Me
But
too, Fern.
good films like this, as David said, they're tense. They ratchet you up, or they make you drill down, and you feel it inside physically. And you are tense. You're probably gripping the arms of your chair if you're in a theater. And so I'm not surprised you went there, because you were afraid for everybody. because they'll
I
all
was afraid in a uniquely American
American
way.
way. Yeah. Well, because we have such crazy gun laws. Okay, so Mitch,
Yes, I was a little concerned about the principal. She really disappointed me. She did not handle the situation. And then, of course, I think about what took place at Columbia and the angst that these people go through in trying to figure out how to solve problems that are very complex. And I think I guess somebody said that the administration should have been more supportive of her, or she should have been more aggressive to go to the administration and let them be the police of the school. But she really had chutzpah to take it upon herself.
Carla did, the teacher, right?
Yeah.
Because she knew that Principal Bohm wouldn't really be that helpful. And it was not in her wheelhouse to do so. She was strictly by the books, woke. We have to be fair to everybody. And there's so many references to, about being fair to everybody, whether or not they deserve it. I like to start at the beginning. And Natalie, you talked about the racism. Yes, she's Polish, and she has that conversation with the guy named Dudek with the glasses. And let's not speak Polish here because it will affect the other teachers. So that's an adult racism. I don't quite know what it was about. It makes me think, well, maybe it is East Germany, Mona, which is right next to Poland. But they themselves are a little on guard for their background. And
I think that the Germans perceive the Poles as more
lesser,
backwards.
lesser. Yeah.
They come and work and they clean houses and they act as au pairs, and the Germans see themselves as better.
I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but the black teacher, the real Thomas,
Yeah.
with the graying beard and the graying hair, he's the one who said, work with us. I hate being called a racist myself, and that drove him nuts. And, he really turned against her because of that. But that's another aspect of it. So yes, Betty, you're muted, lower left corner.
Sorry about that. I forgot. I just wanted to mention, just going back to what we were talking about before, and the recording people and spying on people in East Germany. I wanted to mention that during Nazi times, and it, as even just prior, when Hitler was coming to power, they were doing that in Western Germany too. And I remember reading that that people, if they wanted to discuss things, they would go to the park because there was so much spying on people, and that was in West Germany. So yeah, so I did want to mention that too. And so it wasn't just
It wasn't just East Germany. No, I mean, we had our own espionage services.
Yeah.
Although we were far behind the British, who were way out there in World War II. Okay, so let's move on to the film itself. There are smatterings of all these issues throughout the film. It's very complex, but it's not that complex. And I'm not going to run down all the 50 points I made, but there are so many mini confrontations and negotiations in every scene that you can see. And David, that may be why you're so on pins and needles with this film, because there's a conflict in every scene and a decision to be made and different points of view. And there's no relief from it. It's really, it's all talk, and the film takes place in our heads like so many really good films do. There's no action. The theft is one action. Oscar stealing the laptop to destroy the evidence, that's another. The rest of it is minor. It's nothing. What moves the plot forward is people's paranoia, their fear, or people's vengeance to lash out at something they don't know about. And that's where the film bears its ugly teeth. And so let's start out. the first big scene is when the three teachers ask the boy and the girl, who's been giving us trouble? Here, can you tell us anything? And the girl says, I don't know anything about it. And the boy said, I don't want to talk. And then the instructor goes with a list and he says, well, you don't have to say anything. Just tell me who you suspect. So this goes back to Mona's Stasi thing, and it gets all our hackles up. Oh, so you're not really coercing him, but you're forcing him as an adult and a teacher to cooperate against his will. Carla, the teacher, would say, no, leave it alone. You can't do this. She's not on board with that. And we know that in that very first scene. And then we see the morning exercise session where she's having fun with the students. My God, this woman can do everything right with them. That's a great scene to establish a good relationship with the students. And there's a moment with the Muslim girl where she calls her to solve a problem, one that calls attention to her, but it also says she has no issue with Muslims. And that will come up again with Ali and Ali's parents. And then the girls are told to leave, and Dudek looks through the wallets of people, and he finds a lot of money in Ali's wallet. Ali is Turkish. And so they have to investigate because they have no other leads. It's like Casablanca. Well, round up the usual suspects. He's a Muslim. And there's that savage scene, and you just feel for his parents with the administrators, and they're seething. They know they're being singled out because they feel they're being singled out because they're Muslim. And they said, no, it's not because you're Muslim. It's because he had a lot of money in his wallet. So the mother says, no, I gave him that money. It's wrong to give a child money. And what I didn't like was the father said, I know we don't want to steal because I'd break his legs if he did. So that's that harsh Islamic Sharia law entering in there. But still, they felt unjustly targeted. It's not, were they, had anybody else had that much money in their wallet, they would have called that child and that child's parents in as well. But again, it's their techniques that were so offensive and the way they handled them. And it comes up again later among the teachers. And this is another point of negotiation when I guess it's Thomas or it's Dudek, I forget which, the male teacher asked to see their wallets. He says, oh, and it's voluntary, of course. It's like it's voluntary that you point out the names you suspect. They're kidding themselves. They're being overly polite and politically correct while being just as corruptly abusive and torturous to the students. It's just veiled, which really got under my skin because they feel like hypocrites from the beginning. And I forget who said it. Everybody's culpable in this film. Everybody. So that bothered me from the beginning. Please chime in if you have other scenes too, but there's so many points, that are worth review. Oh, and why do we see Carla putting, some money into the piggy bank when she takes her coffee? We need it later because she sees a fellow teacher taking money out of the piggy bank. So again, this is the toxic environment of theft that we begin to see is rampant in this school. And that goes no further. But again, it adds to the context. And it certainly adds to Carla's paranoia. Carla doesn't approve of that either because Carla puts the money in. And then we go back to the exercise in the gym and two students leave.
Jim, I think that Marina wanted to say something.
Marina? No? Oh, Brad.
Almost Marina.
Yeah, I think you may have skipped a scene which for me was very telling. It was when she passed back their test papers. Are you going to get to that, or should I?
Did that happen yet? I'm not sure if I didn't make a note of it, so it may.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly where it was.
What's your point about
this point in the movie, but I thought it was very, very telling because it's very traditional in European schools to post grades.
I see.
So that the point of it is to humiliate the underperformer and to as a way of encouraging them to do better. I mean, that was the way European schools worked. And that issue came up in the classroom. Should she post the grades? She wasn't totally woke because her response, instead of saying, no, we're not going to do it that way, she put it to a vote in the classroom.
That's overly woke.
I don't know if you remember it. No, not exactly. Because it was the students were actually split pretty
Yes,
50-50. And then she took it upon herself to,
Um,
to,
but what is
only
she?
after having the vote.
Right.
So if she were totally woke, she wouldn't even have put it to a vote. She would have just said, we're not going to do it that way.
Oh,
So
okay. Well, maybe we have a different definition of woke. Part of it is bending over backwards to give credence to people who don't deserve it. What interested me about that scene was the class was split, and then some student says, well, what does it matter? In a couple of weeks, we won't remember. And then Carla says, oh, well, in that case, why should I do it at all? It's not effective. It's just a momentary thing. And that's how she gets out of it. I thought that was very skillful. I felt she didn't want to do it, but that shows how untraditional she was, Brad. Now, bucking the old school stern system. So here's the first major negotiation. She goes out in the yard and she finds 3 students and noticed that one of them put something under his leg, and it was a lighter. We don't know what it was doing. One of them said it's to cook heroin, and she demands it, and he gives it to her. And there's a negotiation on the walk back into school between her and him. No, she's not going to tell his parents, but she's going to hold on to it for now. And it was kind of even-handed, but probably gave more credence to the student because than she should have. They walked out of a class, said they needed fresh air, but they didn't ask to be excused. That wouldn't fly in an American gym class. But she's into bargaining with the kids because that's a gentler way of accomplishing the same deal. And she made him say the words about, I forget what the promise was, but he'd never do it again. And then she sees the next negotiation. She sees a child cheating on a test. That's the young Tom. And she saw it. She goes to his desk. She finds the cheat sheet, and she confronts him. And here's where she packs the cudgel of fairness. Is it fair to the others that you cheated and they didn't? And that shames him. But he says, what do you want me to do? Okay, you caught me. He's one of these recalcitrant kids who, and only begrudgingly acknowledged that what he did was dishonest. So she's trying to work with them and be stern. So she's split, Brad, on that fence between sternness and flexibility, not between overgenerous and sternness, but she takes the middle ground. Then there's a teacher's conversation where the teachers talk about Ali's parents. Is he a cab driver because he's Turkish? Is that racially profiling him? No, I wasn't asking for like that. It just means that maybe there aren't enough parents around to help him with his classwork. And that was very disturbing. And Carla was disturbed by that comment. She doesn't really buy it. And the guy who made that comment is the Black teacher. So, that's why it's ironic. He says, I hate being called a racist. Now, we don't know. Maybe that was his first thought and only thought about Ali's bad performance in school. But he's quick to search for a racial profile of that group of people, that is a lot of taxi drivers because they're immigrants, to fit his investigation instead of letting the facts that they discover help him with his investigation. So that's an agenda-driven bias that was unintentional, but it was there in that. So that was a very subtle thing, but I'm so glad they did that. Well, by this time, Carla's a little paranoid. she leaves her laptop open. She leaves some money in her wallet, and she goes out. She comes back, and she reviews it, and she knows she's done something wrong because when somebody approaches her, she slaps the laptop closed and goes to the bathroom to read it, to look at it. And because she's found her wallet is empty. And that's where the conversation with Dudek comes in, Natalie, where let's not speak Polish here. You know, the other teachers will take an issue with that. And he agrees. And there are little things like when she's looking at the laptop, she hears a toilet flush and she looks up. You know, it's like she's scared. She knows what she's doing is like a secret, must be a secret. And that adds to the tension. And please chime in if you have anything, your favorite scenes. And then she goes, what did you people think of the confrontation with Mrs. Kuhn, Oscar's mother? Did you think she was guilty then? I mean, you'd seen the video, you know, and you felt her defense of herself was credible, but was even more credible was Carla's squirming not to say, I have the proof right here. You know, she takes the proof to the principal after that scene. And Stephen Mona, you had something?
I was just going to say, she has no idea that there was anything illegal going on, and she knows she can get away with it. And I just thought, you know, she would just deny it, and say, you can't prove anything. And that's how she was. She
Mrs.
knew
Kuhn?
she did it and even though she was caught, I believe she felt she had no reason to admit it. And in fact, later on, she's sort of right because it's very difficult when the only evidence is illegally acquired.
Right. Thank you for your lawyerly opinion, but it's so true. And she knew that. And I think that was one of Carla's sins in this picture, maybe the only one.
I kept wondering
talk about
what
it.
was wrong with her. There was something off about Mrs. Kuhn. I thought she had definitely committed this theft, but she was so adamant and so outraged, which is actually quite typical of some people who've been caught doing something wrong. And then I began to wonder if the child knew about his mother stealing or having some kind of mental problem. By the end of the movie, I just thought Mrs. Kuhn was mentally ill. I thought there was something really wrong with her, but I couldn't, you know, my only evidence was just watching her interactions with other people.
I thought she protested too much. I mean, she cries on cue, you know, and good sociopaths can do that. You know, they're great actors. And basically, they deflect the accusation onto you. Right. Trump does that all the time, accuses people of what he's doing, you know, and it's a common ploy. It's called deflection. And she's a master at it. I think the boy was severely hurt because he's living with this woman who's very mixed up. And, you know, boys that age, 10 years old, 12 years old, they need a lot of support. And for him to wonder about his own mother is very destabilizing. You know, they need the security as they're approaching puberty, to know their love, to know their environment, not to question it, to feel secure at home. And I bet he didn't. You know, I can't imagine that he did, which is why he's so reclusive, apart from the bullying he got from the other students. They sensed it. I think they smelled it on him. And that's why they picked him as a target.
Well, so he actually manifested some of his mother's peculiarities in the final scene.
Yeah. Let's not go there yet.
Jim, you have a number of hands up.
including, so Linda, let's take you first. You're at the top of my
Yeah.
screen.
The other thing is when you see the crime, you really never see her face. So, I'm not saying that she's not guilty, but it is not as conclusive as if the video showed her face. You see her blouse and you see the pattern on her blouse. So to me, there was, a little bit of I'd say, not complete closure. So, she is denying she did it. And, if it were a police case, they don't have evidence of her face. It's possible somebody had the same blouse. So I think that the filmmaker made me feel at least a little bit, kind of, I guess, not totally convinced about her crime.
Okay, if you were on a jury, would you convict her based on the video?
Probably for me, probably not. I'd want to see her face. I would think I'd have doubt.
Okay, so there's a credible doubt that it was her.
Yeah, at least for me, yeah.
Okay. Although Bohm, the principal, was quick to believe it was her. And at one point, when she says maybe the teacher did it, and they quickly say, well, half the people are men, so they're not wearing blouses, and all the others were accounted for in classes or absentees. So that's how that concern was dealt with, and they never visited that again, except psychologically with her, and we'll come to that moment. Jeff Ellison has joined us somewhere, and when he shows up, maybe hi Jeff. We're deep into the movie now. At some point, I wanted to rely on your classroom experience in middle school to talk about how did this resonate with you, especially with Jewish students and your familiarity with Germany and the Holocaust. You got a minute.
Okay, I'll try to make it quick. I viewed the movie on two different levels. I looked at it in terms of the school and what was happening in the school. And then the other aspect as the school as kind of a representation of society as a whole. And so as a school, I have seen this happen so many times where a relatively minor incident that happens is so mismanaged by administration that it completely blows up and becomes something huge. This is, I mean, it resonated so much with me on that level. On the societal level, it seemed to me that schools are microcosms of the society. And we're dealing with cheating and lying and accusations about racism or sexism by students that are become fodder for gossip. And then, of course, the parents have their own WhatsApp and they make it even worse. And especially this is true for new teachers who are always under the gun by parents. And the accusation about racism by that was leveled against one of the teachers by the Turkish parents, and a newspaper where they deceive her. They tell her they're going to give her a copy before they issue it, and they don't do that. You see students cheating in class at the beginning of the film. You see a teacher stealing something from a piggy bank at the beginning, and it's like all of this stuff that's happening in society is also manifest in the school.
Okay, let me ask you a question as an educator. Would you teach with this film? Would you show it to your students, or is it too much?
I actually shared it with teachers. I told teachers to watch it, because unfortunately, most of the films about education in the United States don't really look at deeply into what's going on in schools. They're kind of lighthearted comedies. They're fun. They're, romantic comedies or whatever. This film was one of the first that I've ever seen that takes a really deep dive into what's really happening into America's schools, into schools.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue. I want to go to the meeting, the joint solution meeting, where Kuhn and Carla and Bohm, the principal, and I think Dudek is present as well, talk about, well, how can we solve this amongst ourselves? And that's such a woke thing. It's like, this is justice we're talking about. How do you negotiate justice when somebody feels they've been wronged and somebody says, well, you can't prove it, so therefore I'm innocent? It's a very tough situation and they struggle with it. And I forget what the conclusion of the meeting is. Oh, Kuhn cries and leaves with her son. She leaves school. She's so angry. That happens 33 minutes in. And then comes that comment, I think from Dudek, you took a video. Well, that violates our privacy laws here, as though that's worse than the theft, the petty theft. And even Vanessa, who's a teacher who appears very late, the curly red-haired woman, says, I feel violated. You did that without our consent. I mean, and she's new to the picture. It's a flaw. It should have been some other teacher who they introduced earlier. And then Principal Bohm says we have to be very careful with our phrasing, careful with our speech. And that's when the negotiation happens between Carla and the kids, about posting the grades. And then she gives Thomas the cube. And then we go to the conference where they ask Oscar to call his mother. And she says she doesn't want to talk to you. But Oscar knows something is up. He said, is this about stealing? And they say, we can't tell you. And this is, in a way, the cardinal sin of the administration. By not coming clean with what the issue is, the students' imagination runs wild, all of the students, regardless of their point of view. They just want to be included in the conversation, and they are trying to be protected by the administration. And the teachers won't tell him. It's like Carla not saying she had a video or had a video or didn't have a video. She doesn't want to interfere with the investigation. Yes, it's a volatile subject. She's been warned. And Bohm then says, trust my experience. Well, she's not very trustworthy at that point, because she offers Kuhn, you just return the money and we'll bury this. And regarding the video, she said, oh my God, if we go to the school's lawyers, they'll tell us to turn it over to the police. And we don't want that. So, Jeff, that's an illustration of administration's bungling a delicate situation. And then there's that scene of the parents
Wait,
meeting.
before you leave the scene, there's some comments, Jim.
Kimberly?
I was just curious. I wasn't convinced that she took the money. And I'm curious as to how most of you decided that by looking at the video that she was guilty. And yet when she emptied her pockets and her wallet, you didn't think that could be the truth, that she didn't do it. I mean, I just don't know how that reasoning was done.
Well, let's let the mob speak. Mobster Ramona, speak.
The reason I thought she was guilty is the blouse was extremely distinctive. I could not imagine that any other person was wearing that blouse, as the principal later explained. The sleeved arm reached into the purse, which was where, or whatever it was that the money was in. She had access to the teacher's lounge. Everybody knew that. It would not have caused any suspicion for her to walk in and out of the teacher's lounge. And I thought she was probably responsible for every theft that they'd been experiencing. because I thought something was wrong with this woman as the movie went on. I really thought she was mentally off, but that's why I would have, in a trial situation, I would have found her guilty.
Okay, any other opinions from one person?
Well, the only part that wasn't answered was the money. And once she was being called in, who knows where she hid it? She obviously was smart enough to know you can't prove it unless you've done something illegal. And she puts the money somewhere, could be in a different pocket in her purse, wherever. She's not stupid enough to put it in her wallet if she's going to claim she's innocent. She'd already been accused beforehand by Carla.
Okay, but let me say one thing about the movie and the overall. We are never told that she did it or didn't do it. And that's the conundrum of the ending. I don't want to get into that now. We still have half an hour to go. But the ending doesn't really say. The ending is about Oscar and Carla. It's not about the mother. It's not about the Oscar and the mother, although it's tangential to the cube. Yeah, Mitchell, is that you? No. Marina. Go ahead, Marina.
I just wanted to mention that the first time we see Miss Kuhn was when a teacher asks her as an administrator to fix the copy machine. And she's saying, we'll get to it sometime. And then eventually she sends her subordinate to do it. She's not doing anything right away. She's postponing things. She's stalling things. So she's a person who's there, but not being helpful. And while I also had doubts whether she was guilty of theft, her behavior pushes me against her.
Okay.
I certainly thought that she was probably, on the path of being a sociopath, and she just was a liar. And people who are that, they lie to you. They don't hesitate to just boldly lie, even if you catch them right in the middle of the act. They say, no, you're seeing it wrong. There's something wrong with your eyes.
Right. Let's move on from here because we're coming up to a very important scene. It's the parent-teacher meeting, which turns out to be very incendiary. The parents are got wind of something already, and Mrs. Kuhn walks in, wet with rain, and drops this huge bomb on all the other parents, and takes it to an extreme about court and it's like, what is this? And Carla just says, and maybe she was too meek here. She said, I can't discuss it. But a lot of stuff is like regurgitated what we've seen in the last hour or 45 minutes. How did you feel about that scene? Did you trust Kuhn? Did you still not trust her? Was the Tom's father who comes in late, was he disappointed because he turned against her so quickly? Other people turned against her as well. The pregnant lady stands up and said, I have heard that. So she's disseminating the rumor to the masses in that scene. And that's a demonstration of how you plant a seed of suspicion. It doesn't go away easily because it could be.
It's also dealing, I think, with the impact of social media. The parents themselves had a WhatsApp group,
right,
where they were discussing this among themselves. Clearly, the teacher was not part of that discussion. Right. And here she is, this idealistic, young, apparently somebody who had great talent as a teacher, is absolutely being destroyed by the system in the institution.
Right.
Nobody defends her as she's being attacked by all these parents. She's left to be there on her own.
And that's when she has a panic attack and runs to the bathroom. And then
Jim.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought this was one of the two moments in the film where, to me, it lacked a certain degree of realism. I felt that the school would have had security, that she wouldn't have been able to get into the school, and along with the scene with the newspaper where there didn't seem to be a teacher advisor to the group.
Right.
I just felt that, the movie lost some realism for me at those two moments.
Yes, I agree. I didn't sense the security was an issue because they'd never had any problems in the past and they don't have guns in that country.
They still
But
have
certainly the
security.
newspaper would have a faculty advisor. Plus, the newspaper had middle schoolers and high schoolers together. They would never be in the same class and held to the standards of journalism, the same standards. I have to tell a story. When I was in high school, and I was the editor of the literary magazine at the high school, and there was a newspaper as well, separate from us, and they had their own um, teacher supervisor, and they published an article about the literary magazine, and they quoted me without interviewing me. So I went to the teacher and I complained. I said, it's not that it was so bad, but you can't do this. And she said, oh, no, we're just teaching journalism here. It was okay. And I left. It was no harm done, really, but I was pissed off, and it hurts when somebody puts words in your mouth. This,
Jim, I went to a small public high school because there were only 90 in my graduating class,
Mhm.
and journalism and all of that. There were things where the high school from 7 through 12 were treated as a single unit. It's not always separate.
right. This though was not a small high school. It was quite prosperous, new building, gorgeous architecture and design for a school. So, that I take that as literary license for this film. Betty, you're muted, Betty.
Yeah, I just wanted what I think you were saying before about, kind of a seed was planted among the parents and then there was all this reaction. The same thing happened with the students, a seed was planted and then everybody ran with it. It just grew.
Right. Now, next there's a scene where Lucas, a student in class, casts aspersions on Ali. They know, even though he was acquitted in that conference with his parents, they know he was called to into a conference by the administration. He was suspected of doing something wrong. And now Lucas just calls him, well, he's an inherited liar, just like he's an inherited fatty. He got into fat shaming too. So it's like little minds, whether they're big high schools, little high schools, adults or children, the human mind will devolve or retreat back into simplicity that is often just false because it's the only solution they can imagine or because it's more comforting. But that inherited liar stuff is, you could say veiled racism. It's bigotry. It's like, because he's heavy set doesn't mean he did something wrong. Because he's Turkish doesn't mean he did something. But this waspy German kid, can tease him. Kids are like that. This bullying, by the way, their efforts to legislate against internet bullying. It's just very hard to put into law, into words. So we'll see where that takes us. And the federal government's trying to pressure the, Facebook and Instagram to take more actions. And again, it's a value judgment, isn't it? Is the damage to free speech as damaging as what the bullying does to a person? It's a very hard line to draw. You can't create an algorithm or even AI to distinguish how to make that decision. That's why we have judges, not the Supreme Court, of course. They don't know how to make a decision. Let's move on. And we see how Oscar is affected by this fat shaming. There's a shot of him and the accusations and the theft. It just he's stricken by it. I don't quite know how to read his face other than he's not comfortable. And I think I don't know where this happens. Rumor is you're not in control. Oh yeah, there was a woman who calls this conversation Carla has with a mother who wasn't at the parent-teacher meeting. And she says, I heard from the others that you're not in control of the class.
Mm.
Well, wait a second, does everybody there feel that way? No, she heard from one or two people. So she's concluding all of them. And who's to say what not in control of the class means? She wasn't, I acknowledge that. But when when the phone call woman says that, it's like, oh, it's beginning to get out of control. People are being swayed who have, we're not witnesses. And then Oscar appears, and he asks for clue. Dudek is there and Carla's there, and he asks for, well, tell me what's the evidence you have, and they say we can't tell you. And again, that's the same thing, just depriving the students of any sense of what it is because they can't handle it, ratchets up the paranoia and the rumor mongering.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's why we don't tell kids things, because they can't handle it. I think that's how we control children, and we fool ourselves to think that they don't know what's going on. When I see it in my work, when parents are divorcing, they say, my kid doesn't know what's going on.
They know.
I say, every kid knows everything. Having a kid in your house is like having a CIA live with you. And
And sometimes more inimical.
they know everything, and not saying it just makes people uneasy and scared, but it keeps the powerful in control.
Right. So again, it's an administration not thinking of how the action or the news will be received by those it affects most. You have to begin to introduce adulthood by showing kids you respect them, not by saying, I respect the legal investigation that's going on, so I can't tell you a thing about it. It's not, and it's not for Carla to say, I support her in her not telling the kids anything directly, but I do criticize the principal. And then Oscar actually threatens them. You'll see they'll be first he offers them money. Here's what it's all I have, take it. Let's let this drop. And they say, no, it's not about the money, it's about honesty. And then he says, there'll be consequences if you don't offer a public apology. Are you threatening us? He sure is. And then Vanessa, the unusual teacher who comes in so late, asked about the parents' class. She heard the talk. So one of the parents who may have another child in Vanessa's class talked to her. So word gets around. We see it get around among the kids, we see it get around among the parents, and we're going to see it later in the teachers. Steve?
I was just going to say, at some point, though, in any investigation, legal or otherwise, you can't just go around telling people
Right.
what you think, what you know, and that's true vis-a-vis the parents, vis-a-vis the children. It happened to be, the suspect's child. The mother should have been telling him. I don't see how in any real world situation the administration before they're ready to do anything and give it to the police is in any position to talk to children, faculty, or anyone about what they think or what they're planning.
Well, but you have to put the fires out before they start. And I think you have to.
There are times when you just can't because of other obligations.
Well, I think you have to try.
I think they did try. I think
Yeah.
it didn't go well, but I think
In
the
their own way,
principal
people way.
really did try.
And then the teachers come up to her in the teacher's lounge. The teacher, the tall black guy, he says, and what about this video? Who did he hear that from? Bohm, right? The kids. It's like, it's out of control at this point. And that's about at the 1 hour mark, halfway through the film. And we see the toll it's taking on her. There's a moment where she's just suffering. And you wonder. That's why I question the placement of the panic attack. I thought maybe it came too early. Because she's just, it makes her so heroic. She goes through such a long stretch without showing too much. I thought maybe the filmmakers could have delayed that. I don't know how, just a random thought, but you got to think about these things. It's about the tone and shaping the audience's empathy towards her. And I can't read my own note. I'm so sorry. Oh, well, let's cut to the student interview because that's terribly important. They send the two young ones to ask her for the interview now because they got their deadline moved up. So she stupidly says, yes, I'll be interviewed. And she adopts the same tone with the students that she does with the parents. And that's to say as little as possible. And this is where the students, mostly the upper school students, bear their ugly fangs and repeat what they've learned from observing the public press. And that was the most chilling part of the movie for me. It could have been Truth Social. It could have been Ron DeSantis. It could have been these people challenging you, and just the challenges made you suspect, and she didn't defend herself. She didn't say it's an investigation. I have to be impartial about it and let it run its course, as Steve suggested. She should have said that, but she didn't. I mean, granted, she's under a lot of pressure, and keeping on your feet like that is difficult. And one of the students even unnerved her, said, "You're Polish, Vladek or Novak is a Polish name, isn't it?" So here's that adult racism coming in from the mouth of a child. And she says, well, I was born in Poland, but I was raised in Germany, and she names the town. And then this came from a younger student and said, what advice do you have us? And she said, well, you have to understand what you're going through is a period of insecurity. Everybody goes through that, and you will get beyond it. I thought that was kind of ironic because the most insecure person in the whole film is her. And then the older students bring in the heavy ammunition. They bring up the subject of a thief, and why are all of us suspects, and why did they believe that? Because Ali was called into a meeting. It's a little, I don't know where that comes from, other than an assault against one is an assault against many. And they ask questions, and she says, well, we're asking questions to protect the innocent, so you don't have to go accusing these people who are innocent. Well, in a way, that's a tactic that the teachers used in the very first scene. Well, tell us who's innocent, meaning who do you suspect? Who are the few? So we don't have to waste time on the innocent. And then they ask again, they press her. And then they ask point blank, is Mrs. Kuhn a suspect? Well, so they know a lot about, they suspect she is. They're asking for corroboration. And Carla declines to tell. And then they say, is there a video? And she also declines to tell. And that really seals her coffin with the students. And the boy the senior high school boy demands more. And Carla says, I don't feel it's right to comment on the video one way or another. And then the girl, high school student, says, we heard it through the grapevine, and we're just trying to protect our sources. Well, she's trying to protect the source of the evidence as well. So they're not saying who they heard this from. And we just want to know what is going on here. And that's sort of the key youth problem there. They're left out. They're not being treated like real whole people. And that's the mistake now, granted, Steve, it's a tough, onion to slice that way. But that's their main beef. They are feeling belittled. They are being treated like children when they just want to know they're on the path to adulthood, especially the senior high school students.
Jim Mitchell has his hand up.
Mitchell, go ahead.
And Marina.
Go ahead, Mitch, you're muted.
Sorry. At this point of the film, I really got upset with her naivete going to this meeting with the students who really targeted her and had all their facts ready. As a first-year student, she really showed her inexperience, and I really got upset with her going into that meeting by herself and without thinking that she was going to be destroyed.
Yeah, she was naive to say yes. Another thing that came out of that meeting was the students asked her, "Are you going to expel Oscar?" Well, I suspect that's Oscar spreading dissension among the students because they don't want him dismissed, even though not everybody likes him. And that's just a rumor that he may be spreading.
Marina.
Marina, go ahead.
I wanted to point out that the city that she mentioned she's from, Danzig, is a German city that is now Polish city Gdansk. It's the place that was going between Germany and Poland, and she said that she was born there. So with the European Union, she probably can work in any country, but that's the place is indicative of her identity.
Yeah. And there's a student rebellion in her classroom. They won't greet her, they won't do the clapping or the chant, or they won't cooperate at all. And there's a shot of Oscar where he looks actually pleased that chaos is happening. Because at this point, Oscar's he's angry at the accusations against his mother. That's like an hour, it's only halfway through the film, and we're almost out of time. And he's enjoying the classroom getting out of control. That's when we have the problem-solving game in the gymnasium, where he comes up with a solution to hold arms, not just shoulders. And the reason we do this, Carlos says, is we have to change the way we treat each other. That's a big flashing message to us today. But then he breaks out in anger at the other boy, and he pushes him over, and there's a fight and a chase. And he runs and he grabs her laptop, and she chases after him, and he throws it into the river. So he's destroying the evidence. Then there's a high-level meeting with the counselor who says, let's just move him to another school or another classroom. And Carla steps up. What does she say? That won't do him any good. We have to think about his welfare. And that's where she also says, I should leave because that will bring the most calm to the campus. What did you think of that? Okay. Then that's Carla, Joan of Arc. You know, she's throwing herself on the cross of virtue. And
I mean, Jim, what you didn't really mention is how the boy physically attacked her and took the computer and hit her across the face with it. And yet she's so idealistic and trying to be so good. She's doing whatever she can to sort of save this kid.
And to save the laptop. She knows it may be called upon as a piece of evidence.
Well, but they're talking about expelling him or whatever, and she says no, and she doesn't even report that she was physically
Right, she doesn't. She
assaulted.
hides it. You're right. She has a black eye,
hides it.
and she's asked about it, and she says, no, I just slipped.
Yeah. And the fact that he wants to destroy the evidence, to me, is a signal that he believes there is a damning evidence on the laptop.
Yes. Again, it's something he doesn't know for sure, and he's certainly willing to destroy it in case it helps his mother. So I agree. His sympathies are still with her. There's something very interesting about the student newspaper, and this makes me feel like I'm reading the LA Times or Truth Social or something like that. She reads the article, and she confronts the student journalists. And the guy says, we wrote what you didn't say. That like mind altering, you know, how can that be journalism? And she says, no, you have to remove some pages. And the students see it as not personal. We call it journalism. And Carla insists, no, it's between Oscar and me. And it's so telling. And then the students say, well, you're trying to censor us because we wrote what you didn't say. That's like Catch-22 or 1984 or anything by Orwell about fascism. We won't be censored to save you. Oh, so she's guilty, huh? You know, it's like they're saying, allow us to spread disinformation because we feel it should be heard. And Carla makes the point about facts are important. You know, you're allowed your opinions, but not your facts. And we wanted to shed light. We spoke to Mrs. Kuhn, and that's new for Carla. And then she says, you overshot the mark. She doesn't elaborate on that. And then the students so arrogantly say, we serve the truth. You're a problem. Truth overcomes, and the sign on the wall says, truth overcomes all bounds. So this is like youthful enthusiasm. It could be like Palestinian protesters at Columbia or UCLA, where the youthful passion blinds them to the full facts. You know, not that they don't have reason to be enraged. These students do, but the methods are primitive and they resort to things that aren't even in their own best interests. So this is so telling about where we are with journalism, with society, with beliefs, what the standard of proof is. But instead of a panic attack, Carla asked the counselor for a hug. I thought that was, I was so glad that happened. It humanized her. But it's like, that's what's missing from Carla. You know, I wish she had been more heroic, and there's nobody to share her troubles with. And you know, maybe that's another movie, but it felt like not necessary for me. But when Thomas, the teacher, reads the article, there's 4 points that the student article outlined. Ali is an example of our systemic racism. So Thomas, the teacher, takes that personally. Kuhn is suspended. They objected to her suspension without their knowing any evidence. And Carla said, well, I'm not going to acknowledge or deny anything. And then the students say in the article, Kuhn confirmed it. I forget what it was. So by not engaging, and I think, Steve, you brought this up, sometimes by not engaging, you do a disservice to your own cause. Thomas, the student, says, oh, no, Thomas, the teacher, then says, after he reads the article, you did not include us in this conflict. This affects us as well. I don't like being called a racist. She said, but I didn't discuss the video. And he says, just like the students say, but you didn't deny it. So he's asking her to betray a sense of propriety. You know, he's picking away at her, and while offering an olive branch in support. I thought that was very interesting. So it's almost 9 o'clock. I'd like to move to the end. Oh, the group scream is a relief. Did everybody relief at the group scream? And she sort of wins back some of the students with that, because she knows what they need. They need an emotional relief.
No.
She has the whole class screaming.
And, and then Carla calls his mother and she says, how dare you call me? And she says, come get your son, he's here. And she says, he'll come home when he wants to. So Carla accuses Mrs. Kuhn of using Oscar to hide the theft. And you can't do that. And Carla says, Mrs. Kuhn says, your failure don't blame me for your failure as a teacher. And then Carla, in her own diplomatic way, turns it back and says, his failure affects us all. Meaning, you're a failure and we're a failure. It's not just me, honey. But she says it in such a polite way. It's not very effective. Of course, at that point, you can't be effective with Kuhn. Then there's a charming scene where she apologizes to Oscar, but asks him to leave when he comes back after he's suspended. She's very sweet. I didn't want this outcome. It kind of reaches a little bit, and he begins to cry. We see the tears fall. I wish we'd had a close-up of it. And everybody else in the room sees it, and that's why Bohm and the others says, come on, time for us to leave. He's breaking, and she's the only one who can get to him. Let's let her do it. Of course, then when she locks the door, then Bohm is like complains about, why did you lock us out? And that's when at the window, Carla sees Mrs. Kuhn on a bike in the rain, pulling up, looking at her questioningly. You can see Oscar in the background in the point of view shot from the bike. And it's a very telling moment. Yet it's not, Kuhn is not admitting she's guilty. She's come for her son. And the music changes, and then he solves the cube and gives it, doesn't give it to her, but they just look at each other. And that's a lot of resolution for us. They've made friends. So Oscar buried the hatchet with Carla. Doesn't solve the issue of the theft. David Bornstein, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say that when I saw her come by the school and she was looking inside, I don't think she was there to get Oscar. She was there just to sort of, because she's crazy.
Maybe.
That was my interpretation.
She had to go into the fire. She couldn't resist it. That may be the case. And then,
Jim, I don't think that it was a resolution that they were necessarily making peace. I think he just said, I can do this. This is who I am. I didn't see it as a peace move.
I can't refute it. It's what I felt.
Natalie maybe has a different thought.
Natalie,
you're muted.
Sorry. I wouldn't say that it was a peace movement, but at the end, if I remember correctly, the other teachers say, we're going to put him in another school. We're going to get rid of him. And Carla refuses for that to happen.
That happened before.
But that goes back to my first comment when we started, that she had a real strong feeling for this boy, for his potential, and that she hoped that she could make him into a better human being. And that would have given her a teacher status that would have lifted her up as well.
That's how I read it. And that's why I saw it as some kind of resolution, but not a major problem. Now, then what happens? The music changes and it becomes melodic. So that's a cue that the filmmakers want us to think differently. There's no longer that beautiful tensioning cue that they use. The beat. And then what happens? There's a montage that's silent. It's all the empty rooms that we've been in with the camera that we've seen in the whole movie. Does anybody want to chime in on how that might function? I think that's indicting all of us. These are the scenes of the crimes. It happened here and here and here, and you were here in the lounge, and you were here in the anteroom, and you were, all over the place. And it's like, this is the shell of society, but it's where all the bad stuff can take place. And then the surprise, I hope you watched it after the fade out to black. The police are carrying him out on his chair. So he's refused to vacate. And that also is a bit non-committal. Is he doing that for his mother so he can pretend that even though she's guilty, he's still going back to her? Or is it to save face? Or I don't know. I just don't know. How did you people react to that?
Jim,
I interpret it to mean that the true victims in this film were the children.
Yep.
And that's what it's showing him as at the end. He's representing the youth that are victims of this entire organization of school, the institution of schools, as well as the society as the whole. This is what this kid has to somehow come to grips with.
Yeah, I could see that. Brad, final comment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very ambiguous ending, isn't it? I
Yep.
mean, on the one hand, he's being removed physically from the school, but on the other hand, when somebody's elevated in a chair, that's typically a triumphal moment.
Yeah, but they're policemen.
And, you know, he, in a sense, he did triumph in that he fulfilled his promise to her that he would get her. And he did succeed in that. So it was really a very ambiguous ending, I thought.
But
I think it's also very, very significant that, you know, in terms of what's going on in the world, that yesterday you had people glued to chairs, you had students glued to chairs who were carried out, who were picked up bodily and carried out. I mean, you have to, whatever you think of what's been going on, it's very profound that that's how the movie ended, and that's what's in our world right now.
yeah. All right. Well, this was a great discussion. I'm glad that everybody had so many different opinions to chime in, and the movie affected you and the scenes got to you. I thought it was a terrific film and just so well structured and written. I couldn't believe how they understood the meaning of every scene and they followed it up with another scene that played off that meaning. It's a lot about subtext, but it wasn't so sub. It was because you understood the motivations and the meaning of every scene to the participants. So we'll probably meet in 2 weeks. I don't know what the film will be. It'll be hard to top this one, but it'll be different, I promise. Thank you all for participating. It's a good discussion. I'm glad we could all talk. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jim.